Okay, and I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Is that all right? All right, so I want to welcome everybody this evening. We're really happy that you could make it out again tonight for part two. We have some really great special guests with us this evening that'll be able to help you through everything when it comes to considering an offer. Sherry Beveridge will be leading the presentation, and she's joined by Michael Gesford and Mark Arrington. Sherry specializes in recruiting optometrists in the Northeast United States, while Michael and Mark help by covering the rest of the U.S. in their respective regions. And we'll hear a little bit from them later this evening to give you a sense of where their territories are. But Sherry has been connecting optometrists with practices since 2011. She's been enlisted by optometry practices to find new optometrists over 500 times. She's been involved with over 800 interviews. She sent over 300,000 emails and spent about 2,000 hours on the phone. This is like watching the entire Office series over 26 times. I think I've seen it 3 times. But through all of this, Sherry has become very well equipped to help each of you kick off your optometry career successfully. So again, welcome. Please stay engaged and ask your questions this evening, because after all, this is an important part of your future. So we'll utilize the chat feature in Zoom. You can send messages to myself or Ben Kennedy, who's on the call tonight from ETS, or generally, but don't hesitate if you've got a question. I always say just put it in the chat and get it out there, and we'll make sure that we address all those as we go through the presentation tonight. So it's my pleasure to welcome Sherry and the ETS Vision team to present Considering an Offer. Sherry, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Welcome, everyone. You have chosen to invest your time in your future, and that is awesome. Accepting a job offer is one of the biggest decisions you will make. How to manage these offers, knowing what makes one offer better than another, and just plain knowing if you want the job can be difficult. We will be diving into what you can expect and how to manage all of the complicated factors at play. So we are ETS Vision, and we connect optometrists and practices in all 50 states. And if you joined us last week, you might remember we have been doing this for over 10 years. Now, having been involved in hundreds of employment contracts for ODs, we have the experience to guide you through what's next once you have an offer in hand. So my name is Sherry again, and I cover the Northeast states seen here, including Pennsylvania. Now you can reach me via text, email, or phone call. And if you haven't added my contact information yet, go ahead and do that now. It is also in the email that was sent out. So if you're interested in a career in this area, please send a message in the Zoom chat. We'll make sure everything's working properly. Anybody? Connecticut, Delaware,
yeah, if you're looking to stay in Pennsylvania.
Right, Ohio, New York. I've got a great territory. It's a little chilly right now, but
awesome. Looks like Morgan is. So
yep. Morgan, where are you interested in practicing? What state?
Awesome. Well, I sent Sherry's contact information there. Make sure to connect with her after the presentation, and she can give you a better idea of opportunities in Pennsylvania.
Oh yeah, I've got some great ones in Pennsylvania.
Great.
Okay. All right. Well, great. For those of you who are interested in other locations, we do cover the entire United States. And I'm sure someone here is interested in moving to the Florida Keys, especially now, Hawaii, where it's warm, or any other state not listed here. Michael, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. Hello, my name is Michael, and I cover the Midwest and Western United States, along with Alaska and Hawaii. Feel free to text, call, or email me if you have any questions, and I'll be here to answer questions you have throughout the presentation. If you are specifically interested in one of the states shown here or are curious about what a potential career in this area would look like, please let me know. Who here is hoping to practice in these states? Please send a message in the chat.
And
Well,
if after the
well,
presentation you realize that your significant other has family in Utah or California, they might be interested in moving there
yeah.
after graduation, you now have Michael's phone number and email address. So make sure to jot it down and follow up after the presentation if you're interested in the Western United States.
Yeah. Well, the part of the U.S. we haven't talked about yet is Mark's territory, so I'll pass it off to him.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Mark, and I cover the southeastern United States, all the way from Maryland down to Florida and over to Texas. I have a pretty big region that I do work with. I'll be answering questions throughout the presentation as well. If you have any specific questions about the states shown here, I'll be happy to answer them now or after the presentation. How many of you are looking in this region for opportunities?
It must be everyone else. No.
Or I see from Ashland, Florida. I do a lot of work in Florida, really all regions, whether it's the Tampa down through Sarasota or Central Florida and up even in the Panhandle. So, and I see another one for Virginia, Northern Virginia, DC. There's North Carolina, which I'm glad to see that because the North Carolina license is very tricky to get. I feel like you know already, you only have 2 opportunities a year to sit for the boards for that state. So it's a great state to practice in because of the medical amount of optometry that's available to practice there. So North Carolina would be, I'd have some great opportunities there as well. So yeah, any of these states, South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, I've always got some great MD, OD opportunities and private OD practices as well.
Great.
Great, Mark. I know from talking to students, North Carolina is a pretty popular place. And
Yeah.
It was a year or 2 ago, we had a member of the North Carolina Optometric Association who came to campus to talk about North Carolina and kind of I maybe dispel some of the myths around that infamous North Carolina board exam. So,
Right.
so if anybody is interested and has questions about North Carolina, speak to me or speak to Mark. We can set you straight.
Yeah, it's just, it really isn't. The climate is great, beautiful areas to live and work, and then of course the practice mode is very favorable as well.
Absolutely.
So after that, though, I think you all are very fortunate because Salus falls into Sherry's territory, so I'll let her take it away from here.
Thanks, Mark. So we specialize in connecting optometrists and practices in these regions. So the only bad questions are the ones you don't ask. So go ahead at any time, again, send a message in the chat. And again, Ben will let us know and direct the question to one of us. Now that is Ben in the bottom right-hand corner. So Ben, could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Sherry. Hello, everyone. I help with business operations at ETS Vision, and I am one of those other team members Sherry referenced. I will be moderating questions this evening, so feel free to message me directly or the group as a whole if you have any questions. Outside of Sherry, Mark, and Michael, ETS Vision has recruiters who specialize in ophthalmologists and practice managers. We also have a support team making sure we provide you with the best recruiting experience possible. Sherry, I will pass it back to you.
Thank you, Ben. So considering an offer. When considering an offer, the first thing you should do is figure out if you even want to join the practice. Dreading going to work every day isn't worth an extra 2% match on a 401k. So how do you figure out if it is the right fit? When looking at an opportunity, there are 6 factors to consider. Now, we talked about these last week, and we encourage you to watch the recording of that presentation if you weren't able to attend. Those 6 factors form the acronym CLAMPS, which stands for challenge, location, advancement, money, people, and security. Now, once you have filtered opportunities through this and have earned the offer, the biggest factors for your final decision are: do your clinical philosophies match? Do your long-term goals align? And do your personalities work well together? If you are able to check these 3 boxes, you can work through almost anything else. Now, let's say you've gotten an offer and you realize that instead of having each of these 3 major decision criteria match up, it looks more like this. Then you may find yourself declining the offer. And here's how you should go about doing that. So when declining an offer, never do so over text or email. It comes off as unprofessional. Declining an offer should only be done over a phone call, video call, or face-to-face. You don't want to burn bridges or leave a bad impression. Optometry is a small profession, and you never know what the future may hold. Over time, your priority and clamps will shift. Working somewhere may not make sense today, but that same offer may be exactly what you are looking for in the future. Now, along the same lines, make sure to express appreciation and assume that your paths will cross again. It is a big deal to offer a full-time position to someone. So let them know that you are grateful even if the opportunity is not right at that moment. More than likely, you will have to give a reason for passing up the offer. Now, when doing so, be precise, concise, and honest. If you got offered more money somewhere else, and that's the reason you turned down their offer, then say so. If there is no path to ownership, and that is important to you, don't be shy about saying that is the reason their offer isn't a strong fit right now. Avoid saying anything soft, like mentioning a personality mismatch. That's not professional, and it can rub people the wrong way. What questions do you guys have about declining offers?
Sherry, I have a question related to this.
Okay.
I sort of distinguish when I talk to students sometimes, if you're declining an offer, it means that you have met with a practice, they have made you an offer and you are not accepting it. But I also think that you have a kind of an ethical obligation to notify others if you have accepted a job, but you have multiple applications out there. We should let others know that you are withdrawing your application from consideration. Do you agree? And how should that be done professionally?
Absolutely, absolutely. It is professional courtesy at the very least. If someone is planning to invest time to interview you, and honestly, they might be passing up a different candidate, or holding off on contacting someone else. I had a practice that reached out and they were really excited to talk to that candidate, and the candidate accepted a position and didn't let the practice know, and the practice waited about a week or 10 days and definitely could have lost out on another good candidate. So it's just very professional, and you can for that, it depends on where you are in the process of the interview. If you've just applied and they email you, then I think it's okay to email back that you've accepted a position. At that point, you haven't developed a rapport and a relationship as much.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I haven't gotten any
Oops.
messages directly yet, so I think we're good
Okay.
to move on.
All right. So let's say your clinical philosophies match, your long-term goals align, and your personalities work well together. Now you know you want the position. So let's talk about money. Now, compensation comes in a few different forms and are typically salary, guaranteed minimums, commission, or a combination. Commission can be based on either collections or production. And while it is not directly compensation, it is important to consider immediate versus long-term compensation, as well as benefits that don't show up on your paycheck. So salary may be familiar to you. The same number shows up on your paycheck every time you receive it. You know how much it is and when you're getting it. Salary is as plain Jane vanilla as it gets. And if your priority on clamps is that S for security, then salary is a great compensation model for you. Now, it often isn't the most lucrative, and we'll talk about that more coming up. You could be offered a base plus a bonus or a guaranteed minimum, meaning you get stable compensation and have upside potential. It's like having a safety net where you know there's only so far you can drop. Now, this graph shows what it would look like with a guaranteed minimum of $9,000 a month. Your production can go up or down, and your income will go up or down with it. But the important thing is that it can only go down to your guaranteed minimum. So it offers stability and the potential to earn additional money. Now, let's say money is your top priority in the 6 clamps factors. You will want to consider straight commission. Now, while your pay may be more volatile than a salary, you know that you will get paid for your hard work and effort. Now, collections or your bonus can be based on optical sales, medical exams, or both. And sometimes a lower percentage of collections actually translates into more income due to a higher volume. It is appropriate for a practice to give you an estimate of your income based on their collection structure. And ETS Vision is a great resource for determining if the compensation is appropriate. Also, most practices that offer percentage-based pay will have new optometrists transfer to a straight commission structure after a time of guaranteed minimums or salary. Typically, they would not put a new person straight into a straight percentage. And as a note on collections, it could be paid out anywhere from 2 times a month, twice a year, or rarely even yearly. Now, when comparing compensation between offers, remember to factor the cost of living. Getting paid $110,000 in beautiful Roanoke, Virginia, where we are based, will get you the same quality of life as $184,000 in Queens, New York City. Now, there are great calculators for this from Smart Asset, Bankrate.com, and NerdWallet. So that's how you compare the compensation you have gotten offered, but you should not compare your offer to someone else's. They most likely have different priorities than you, and their benefits are almost certainly different. You need to focus on your big 3: clinical philosophy, personalities, and what the future holds. Time kills all deals. If you hold out accepting an offer because your friend got a better offer or what you think is a better offer, you might run the risk of losing your offer. Once compensation comes up during the offer, you can ask how it is expected to change in years 3 or even 5. Through your interview process and offer letter, you should have a pretty good idea of what the future could hold at your prospective practice. Now, real quick, before moving on, we really appreciate everyone that gave us feedback last week. 2 of you mentioned you would like to see real compensation numbers, so we included that tonight. And before moving on to these numbers, these are averages for every optometrist. Most of the people in this study had 10 years, over 10 years of experience. So this image shows you how having a more variable income often results in higher overall compensation. You'll notice with salary being low risk, average compensation was around $130,000. Straight collections being higher risk and prone to fluctuation resulted in higher average compensation, around $201,000. That should give you some clarity if security or money are your priorities on clamps. If your priority is challenge, location, advancement, or people, you could end up in any compensation structure and likely be happy. What questions do you have about compensation? I know this is an important topic. And again, this study that they did was typically for optometrists with over 10 years experience.
And while you are typing out your questions, I'm getting the URLs to those cost of living calculators we talked about a moment ago.
Right.
So
I will say that the practice revenue dependent only, that's the 200,666. I think that probably partners and owners are probably included in that, because that obviously is just your income is what the practice is generating.
I will add, Sherry, typically that's going to be, not always, but typically it's going to be a lot of the ophthalmology MD/OD practices that you're able to earn up in the 180, 200, or 220 or better based on the collections revenue. They have a very high volume of patients that you're seeing, but they also have, you're giving the patient really good medical exams as well. They have it high state-of-the-art equipment.
Right.
They've got sometimes 2 techs per OD. They might have a scribe assigned to you. You might have multiple treatment lanes. So all you're doing is going right in and doing the exam. Everything is set up for you. And it's, I've certainly worked with a lot of doctors that are earning 180 to 220,000, but it's still a small percentage because they're willing to take the risk of the collections method. That's for sure.
Right. Or OD practice owners and partners can definitely seen in that range as well.
Yeah, equity is, there's 2 the partners, they're going to have equity stake in the practice as well. Even optometrists, I've seen in some of the ophthalmology practices, they'll offer equity to the OD as well as the ophthalmologist.
I think that one thing needs to be mentioned in that case Mark was saying is, generally speaking, in order to have that kind of income, you're looking at probably seeing about 4 to 5 patients an hour
Or
easily, or more, maybe even up to 6. 10-minute exams it would be common to make that kind of revenue usually.
Yeah, depending on the type of exams, post-ops and things mixed in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No questions on money? Go ahead. Sorry, Michael.
No, I was going to say and probably you might even have your techs doing refractions as well.
Great. And we did have one question come in. What would we request which pay structure we would prefer when negotiating contracts, or do established practices typically have a pay structure that they prefer that we are confined to?
Yes, practices typically will have a predetermined compensation structure.
Yeah.
So you likely will not have a choice. Some practices will offer you either a salary or a straight percentage. And typically anybody new to the practice would go on salary for the first year maybe. And that way you can see the potential. But now most practices, I would say, have a specific structure. You can search for practices that, like, for instance, as Mark referenced, MD/OD practices oftentimes do a salary plus a percentage or a straight percentage. So that's one type of practice modality that we often see that offered. Another way that we see straight percentages offered is sometimes in optical. And then again, in practices, I've seen it in all OD practices as well. And especially if you're going to have partnership, eventually partnership or ownership.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like as Sherry mentioned earlier, a lot of times the ophthalmology practice will give the OD 1 to 2 years at a base salary with some upside with production, but then they prefer the OD to go into collections. So that way they hit the ground running. It takes a while to get used to the patient flow, and you're really first time out working. So they understand that the new grad is not going to be as efficient or with patients as somebody that's been there for 5 years.
Right.
And also they want to build up your patient base as you're starting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Michael, Mark, Sherry, it looks like they were happy with your answer. And I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. Ryan, have you had anyone message you directly?
I have, but it's a question sort of unrelated. So I'm just going to hang on to that one, and we might be addressing it later.
Okay. All right. Now, benefits and other perks. Compensation does not stop at your paycheck. The important thing to remember is that $1 is worth just that, $1. Getting some or all of your life, malpractice, or health insurance covered is like getting that extra $1. The same thing goes for continuing education, student loan repayment, retirement benefits, and signing bonuses. You should know that signing bonuses are never free money. They typically come with some sort of lockup period where if you leave, you will have to pay some or all of it back. Now make sure to read the fine print before jumping on an offer strictly because of a signing bonus. One benefit that is not even measured in dollars is your vacation time. And vacation time is just the beginning of some non-financial benefits to consider. So compensation is a large factor when looking at an opportunity, but it certainly isn't everything. It is worth considering that an opportunity that pays less today could result in more pay over the course of your career. Expanding your skill set, being mentored, or having the potential to become a partner or owner will often result in better pay. Intangible benefits to consider. The community in general is a key consideration as well. What's the school system like? Do you enjoy hiking and they have great opportunities for it? Does your significant other have the ability to find their ideal work there as well? If you value the ability to work independently, make sure you are factoring that into your search. At the end of it all, just trust your gut. If an offer is right for you, go ahead and say yes. Now, benefit and compensation takeaways. The biggest takeaway on compensation is that you most likely will not be picking an offer based on compensation. There are a lot of moving parts in an offer, and compensation is just one cog. Make sure you have a strong grasp on what your one or maybe two priorities are between challenge, location, advancement, money, people, and security. And for your final decision, the biggest factors are, do your clinical philosophies match? Do your long-term goals align? And do your personalities work well together? And that, above all else, is likely where you're going to be picking an offer on. Oh, before we move on, do we have any questions about benefits or?
Yeah, Sherry, I had a question come in as you were talking regarding this topic. In practice, when dealing with bonuses and commission, are there any known situations that should be avoided or are unrealistic?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. So I don't know if any of you maybe have some examples of that. I would only say I think this gets to the point of knowing the correct follow-up questions to ask.
It really does, Ryan. I think so. And I'll chime in first and then let Mark and Michael chime in. But I think that, all of the practices that we work with, we talk to them about their compensation structure. But I have talked with, unfortunately, new grads that accepted positions maybe in practices where there was just a single OD owner and they thought they could afford a full-time doctor, and they couldn't. They figured it out after several months that they just didn't have enough patient base. So you're right, depending on the situation. For instance, if you were going to be brought in by a single doctor practice and they want to put you on a percentage, you're going to need to ask a lot of questions about how far out they are booked. Are they going to take more time off and give you some of their patients? Yeah. All of those. And we're happy to discuss one-on-one, so that, because there are a lot of variables at play. But I'll let Mark and Michael chime in and you can see if we answer the question well.
Michael, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I echo what Sherry said. I think is real. I know on our end, we try to do our best at times when that happens, just to mention how far out are you booking patients right now? And if they say 3 months, 4 months out, we know they really definitely need a doctor, that they could probably handle that. But if they tell us something less, maybe just a month out, of course, we want to try to pursue that a little bit more, just to make sure and that they're comfortable with it as well. One thing to mention about bonuses in that, if to ask once in a while, most practices I have bonuses and incentives that are reachable, but once in a while you'll run into a practice that might set some pretty high goals. And so during the interview process, you might just want to ask, what has been a percentage of the doctors hitting some of these goals or hitting some of these bonuses, just to see the response and to know where to go from there on your next question with them. And hopefully you're going to hear, yes, we have a pretty good, they'll be able to tell, yes, we've hit this bonus many times. And what the average is on a bonus would also be a good question to ask if it's done on production. Mark, do you have something you want to?
Yeah, maybe one or two things. And that's one of those that he just mentioned. That was one of the things I was going to mention is I would call it unobtainable goals. Mm-hmm. If they set something way up there, that is okay, we've got a great bonus system for you. You have the ability to earn this, but then if you've never make the bonus, it's not going to matter. So that's definitely a big factor. And I think the other thing to watch out for, and this could be with more of what Sherry was talking about, with maybe with a 1 OD practice or a smaller practice, could be, okay, we'd like you to come in and we've got some patients for you to start with. We'll let you take some of my patients, but we really want you to build your own patient base on your own. You come in, get out in the community, join the Rotary Club, which is not a bad idea. There's a lot of it. They want ODs to be active in the community. That's nothing wrong with that, but they want you to build your entire patient base when you come in. So you don't really have a patient base. So that's another, to me, would be a red flag, especially for a new grad coming out. And those would be two things. Otherwise, just try to watch what the bonus structure is. A lot of times it's going to be 2.5 times, 3 times your salary as a typical range where they start getting bonus. So, if you're earning 120,000 a year and you start bringing in more than 300,000 a year, which is very doable, 400,000 or more a year of collections, then you're going to start making some good bonus money. So I think you have to, if they have multiple ODs, I have a lot of practices that want the ODs, the prospects, to talk to some of their current ODs. If it's an MD OD practice, they want the OD. They'll actually have 2 or 3 ODs call them and do a chat session with the prospect. Ask them whatever questions you want. How does it work? The system, patients. That's always a good idea too.
Right, definitely. The practice should be able to sit down and share some numbers, whether it's their average income from a patient, how many patients they're averaging a day, and those types of questions you'll need to ask before you would go to a high percentage bonus.
You're going to want 15. You're going to want 15 to 20 patients a day, comprehensive exams. That's going to be pretty much right there in the wheelhouse. I think that's a good number to figure.
Yeah.
And Mark, Michael, or Sherry, whichever one of you feels you can answer this. Brianna is wondering if any of you have come across companies that offer student loan repayment as part of their compensation.
Sherry, you want that? Or
I'm not working with anybody right now. I do think that some of the corporate groups are starting to offer it, and I work with one corporate group that it is you can have a conversation about that. Private practices, I don't know of many that offer that, but I do think that private practices are open to discussion a lot of times. Just because they're not offering it, if they know that it's something important to you, doesn't mean that they won't. Some of the bigger groups, I don't know. I need to start asking. That's the third time I've been asked that question this week or within the last week.
I've got 2 to 3, and what she said is correct. Usually you don't see that very often with the private optometry practice, but I've got 2 to 3 MD OD practices that are offering some student loan repayment. But most of the time you see it is with corporate, but I am running across some either larger ophthalmology groups or private equity groups that will offer some student loan repayment now too. They're trying to keep up with some of the, get the candidates from the corporate possibly, I guess.
Similar to Sherry, I haven't run into it much lately either, but I will say that when they do offer something like this, you usually have to be there for about a year before they'll give you like a lump sum for your student loan repayment. You usually don't do it on a monthly basis. You have to be there for, it's almost like a signing bonus in a way. Instead of calling it that, they could call it student loan repayment, and then pay you so much per month, but you don't see it in you don't see it, but it's accumulating, and then so you'll know at the end of the year what you're going to get.
And Michael and Mark and Sherry all referenced a few of the different practice modalities. Last presentation, we got the opportunity to expand on those a little bit more. So I just sent the link to the YouTube recording of last week's presentation, and right around 11 minutes and 30 seconds is when we start talking about those different practice modalities, if you're interested in that topic more. Ryan, have you had any questions come in?
Yeah, I did. I had one more question come in, but to the point of student loan repayment, I have seen similar. It's mostly some corporate optometry that's offering that as part of their packages. But but it is out there. The other question I got, sort of a corollary to the first, dealing with situations, says, I've also heard of situations where, excuse me, where these commissions are being met, but not being awarded by the owner. Any recommendations on how to handle such issues?
Ooh, goodness gracious, that is not a practice I'm working with.
No. That's a legal issue at that point.
Yeah.
That is, yes, that is not common.
I would talk to a lawyer, definitely, because there's a breach of contract there, without a doubt.
Yeah, if it's in
Yeah.
a signed contract, it's all in there in black and white. You certainly would have
Yeah.
a pretty reasonable case.
Yes.
You might want to mention it, of course, to the owner, just casually, nicely mention it. By the way, I've noticed that I haven't received this, and I'm just curious, could you shed some light on this and see what you hear? But yeah. Go ahead, Sharon.
Michael is right. Communication is huge. Always don't assume, I guess, is what Michael was saying also, that have a conversation, a professional conversation first. And but I just thankfully have not run into that.
Yeah.
Yep. That's all the questions I have.
Okay. All right. So now that you have a grasp on a few major considerations, including what compensation and benefits may look like, it's important to know about the rest of the contract. First things first, again, we are not attorneys. This is not legal advice. Also, know that not all attorneys are created equal. It is great that your cousin or sister-in-law is a lawyer. That does not mean they know how to approach an optometrist's employment contract. We have seen deals blow up because a family friend was consulted instead of an area expert. Now, Ryan has a local lawyer that he recommends, Mark Davidson, and please reach out to Ryan directly if you would like Mark's information. If you're hesitant to reach out now due to fees, just remember that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of care. Not spending a few $100s now could result in spending thousands of dollars later in legal fees. Hopefully the person that they knew has a good contract. So there are two basic forms of employment that you'll see: being an employee versus being an independent contractor. You may know it as W-2 versus 1099. And to determine which type your offer is, the IRS has a test. How integral you are to the business, if you are investing in facilities and equipment, your opportunities for profit and loss, your degree of independence, and the amount of judgment required for success. If you're an independent contractor, expect to pay for an accountant and attorney because you are functioning as your own business. Now, 1099s are typically seen in optical positions or part-time positions. I don't see many new grads in those situations unless it is part-time. Contracts are always for a specified amount of time, and that is typically 1 to 3 years. Now, a 3-year contract does not mean you are entitled to a job that entire time. Should you not fulfill your duties and obligations, they can still let you go. And if you decide you want to leave, you will usually have to give a notice in advance. Now, how far in advance varies. Typically, we'll see 30 to 90 days. These contracts are often set to auto renew. So if you show up on that 2-year mark or whenever the contract is set to renew, then you are locked in until it expires again. Non-competes. Now, non-competes are common, and sometimes they're just for show because they're not enforceable in some states. I want to clarify, they are enforceable in Pennsylvania. Again, we are not lawyers. This is not legal advice. Always consult your attorney. But what is an appropriate range varies based on the region. That's a big question we get asked. We can be a great resource in determining if a 30-mile radius is appropriate in Boise, Idaho, or if a 15-block radius is appropriate in New York City. It is important to read the fine print on non-competes, especially if the practice has multiple locations. A big mistake we see often is a new grad signing a very restrictive non-compete in an area where they plan to practice long-term. So we had a doctor who wanted to live in their hometown, so they took the first job that came up, knowing that they wouldn't be there for forever. They signed the non-compete and were surprised when they were not able to practice in their hometown for 2 years after leaving that position. They ended up having to move out of town. So let's say you get hired to work at a practice right next to Salus. Their non-compete says that you can't work within 20 miles of their practice. They also have 6 other locations. In the terms section, they can define their practice as any optometry practice with their name and logo. All of a sudden, you can't work within a 20-mile radius of any of these practices. With just one sentence, you can be locked out of an entire region. Is that appropriate? Does that blow up the offer for you? What should you negotiate for? Now, this is all difficult to determine without all of the details, but that's another reason ETS Vision is a great resource for your job search. Now, Mark had a great example. Could you please share your experience with a non-compete, Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Sherry. This happened just fairly recently with me. We are in February now. I think this happened a couple of months ago. I was working with an OD looking to make a change in the practice model. They wanted to go from a more corporate model in the greater DC, Maryland metro area to a more of a medical type position. Everything had gone perfectly through the interviews. It was a smaller ophthalmology practice. The interviews went well. Their in-person meetings went well. I think they met twice. She was going to be able to transition to this great practice, and we wanted to get out of that retail model. And all the compensation, the benefits, the paid time off were worked out. And then the 3 of us, the owner, myself, and the OD, were on a 7 p.m. conference call one night, and everything was pretty much wrapped up. Things were left that she would move forward with the owner. They were pretty excited because they had a lot of different negotiating going on. Then the next day, I found out that she went back to the non-compete radius that was in the contract and decided she wanted the owner to make a change. She felt it was too big of a radius or distance for that. So she'd already negotiated a lot of other points in the contract over the last probably 2 to 3 weeks, like an increase in her guarantee base salary. She wanted more of a base and less risk on the bonus structure. And then she wanted more PTO, some paid time off. She wanted to add to that. So different things. So when everything was settled and agreed upon, she went back yet one more time to request he make a change that he felt that that was it. He retracted his offer. The entire deal blew up. And he felt, probably with good reason, that this was going to be an ongoing issue once she started a position. He didn't want to make yet another change and have a new hire and a relationship with an employee start with a somewhat contentious and argumentative nature. He felt that, you know, he wanted everything, the right reasons for her to join the group with a positive feeling and with both parties feeling good about the hire, which is very understandable. You don't want to go into a situation with disagreements. So I think that she really felt that he would give in yet again on the non-compete, and he did not. And it probably worked out for the best. I think it certainly for him, because it's better to realize these issues before you start and you're in there for 2 or 3 months, and then all of a sudden you've got all kinds of issues going on, and it wouldn't have worked out in the long run anyway. So that's a good lesson with the non-compete, I think.
Very good lesson. Thank you, Mark. So another component of your contract are the penalties. Now, any of these will typically cost you an early exit, violating a non-compete, soliciting patients or staff, and not abiding by the terms of your sign-on bonus. So before moving on to the common red flags, terms, and negotiation, what questions do you have at this point?
So normally we leave a bigger pause for you to send in messages, but in the interest of time, we'll save the rest of the
Okay.
questions for the end.
Sounds good.
So, yeah.
So let's touch on some common red flags in employment contracts. So common red flags include overly restrictive non-competes. What is appropriate can vary. If a practice requires you to give 9 months notice before leaving, that's not a good sign. As Zig Ziglar says, my word is my bond and contracts are just clarifications. If a practice is not eager to clarify in a permanent format or is vague when they do put it on paper, you should watch out. Some doctors do not even have a written contract. In that case, get everything in documented communications. After the conversation, say, I am glad we got these details ironed out. Please send me an email with everything we covered just to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. Something along those lines, get it in writing. Make sure you look over the contract and take note of any discrepancies from your conversations. Oftentimes, practices will have a standard contract. So let's say you negotiate for an extra week of vacation because your spouse's family lives far away and you want to make an annual trip. Well, the practice may forget to update that one section. If you agreed upon a clear path to ownership, you will want to see that in the contract. Hiring authorities can easily make a mistake, so just take note of areas you would like to discuss or possibly areas you want to negotiate. Now, throughout all of this, stay positive and pleasant. No one got into optometry because they were excited about the details on a contract. Becoming rude or getting accusatory over some detail will lose you an offer and burn a bridge. And at the end of the day, we are looking for everyone to win. Now, some practices talk through all of the details before you get the physical paper, and some just send you the contract. Whenever negotiation takes place, it is important to negotiate your contracts before you sign. Once the ink has dried, it is a done deal. Now, ETS Vision can be a great resource to talk through your contract with. Trying to get more out of a contract is a gamble. Remember that whenever you are gambling, you should be prepared to lose. Just like Mark, I had a candidate who tried to negotiate almost every aspect of the contract with about a dozen revisions, and the practice pulled the offer. Now, this is all just to make sure that you are both on the same page. Being on the same page means you are looking for everyone to benefit. It isn't personal. When you work with ETS Vision, we can help you navigate all of these detailed parts of the contract. So you've gotten the offer, you've done the research, and are about to put your John Hancock on the dotted line. But before you do that, have someone you trust who has an eye for detail look it over. Make sure everything said verbally and over email is reflected in the contract, and review it and do it quickly. Time kills all deals. Waiting 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that could lose you the offer. So we are here for you, and our services are no cost to you. So don't hesitate to call, text, or email Michael, Mark, or myself if you have any questions after tonight. So that's what you need to consider once you've gotten the offer, and I'll pass it off to Ben for the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Sherry. And Mark had to step out. So if you have any questions, I know we had a few people interested in his territory specifically. I think Florida was mentioned, North Carolina and Virginia. His email address and phone numbers are up at the top of the message. So please feel free to shoot him a call, text, or email after tonight's presentation.
That's right.
And I haven't gotten any messages directly in my inbox. Have you, Ryan?
I do, yes.
Awesome.
Sherry, can you please define, you had it listed on your one of your earlier slides, can you please define what you mean by early exit?
Oh, so if you decide, if you sign a 3-year contract and after you've been there a year, you want to leave. So any exiting the practice before your contract officially ends.
Yeah, and as Sherry said earlier, typically you have to provide 30, 60, 90. I've seen 120 days notice. So you have to make sure that you operate within those parameters. Usually, if you provide the necessary advance notice, you're not penalized for anything. But if you walk into the practice Thursday and say, tomorrow's my last day, you're going to encounter issues.
Right.
And then another question was, can you please explain more about what it means to be hired with a path to ownership?
Yes. So when we have practice owners that are looking to transition into retirement, they tell us that that is what they are looking for. So that when we're interviewing potential candidates, we ask, are you interested in ownership? Now, the owner will typically give us an idea of, I want to slow down, I want to decrease my hours, and then I'm planning on being out or selling in 3 years or 5 years or however many years. At that point, it's more, they're looking to do more than hire an employee that's going to come and go. They want someone who is genuinely interested in purchasing the practice. And there are numerous different ways to set it up, but neither party wants to invest a lot of time and then walk away with nothing ever happening. So you want to have serious discussions, and you would like to see something in the contract, whether I've seen a practice that put away a certain amount of money into an account that if the doctor purchased the practice, that money would go towards the practice. So the doctor, it was an extra above their salary that would go into that. You can also figure out a formula and put it in the contract of how you would determine the price of the practice purchase. This allows for, if you're going to come in and you're building up your patient base, optometrists say, well, I don't want to pay more for a practice that I help build up, which is fair. So there are definitely ways that you can structure it. Now, Michael, maybe you've seen something different in a way that they structured it for ownership?
I've seen it similar in that the practice owner would say, when you come on board, we'll do an evaluation, we'll do of looking what this practice is today, what the price is of this practice today. And then when it's time to sell, we'll do another practice evaluation and see what the practice is worth then. And then the times they'll average it. So they'll give you an in-between, which is a really, really nice way to go, really, because you're building up that practice at the same time, but you came on early on to build that practice up. So it's really nice. Also, I think when you're coming in on the ground floor on something like this, remember, this is a relationship that you're building. So hopefully that it's going to work out. I always tell them it's almost like a marriage. You want to see if everything fits well. So you don't want to be offered the practice in a month or two. You want to be there for a little bit, see what the staff is like, see what the patient base, see how you get along with the owner, get a good feel for everything around you before you want to make that plunge, because you're looking at making a long-term long-term agreement here, that commitment, excuse me, and you want to make sure that you got both feet in and not 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
And that there's a timeline for
Yeah.
your benefit as well for the doctor. There's actual guidelines that the doctor doesn't decide after 3 years, well, I'm gonna work 4 more years, that type of thing. You just want to set goals, and again, as Michael said, you might not want everything in writing immediately, but within a reasonable amount of time.
Usually after the first year, the practice owner should sit down with you and start discussing, go over the year, and then start looking down the road at an ownership. Then that's a good time for that talk to really start taking place. A lot can happen in 12 months. So,
along those same lines, does ETS have a division that does practice appraisals and can help advise students along that line? No?
We do not. We are not brokers. We do work with practices that are for sale. And we can recommend, we have a list of financiers and people like that. But we make the matches. We talk with the individuals and really try and find out if your goals align even before you have a first conversation, and tell you as much as we can about the practice. But we do not handle the accounting lawyers or anything like that. We're the people.
Do you find that practices that do come to you that have expressed an interest in selling eventually, have many of them begun the discussion and worked with practice management, had the appraisals done, worked with brokers? Have they done some of that groundwork? And at what point, I guess, is it appropriate for a student or someone on the buyer's end to contact those same services?
Right.
And I'll also say, be aware too, you're going to have some legal representation. And so I have seen instances where the practice owner says, oh, hey, don't worry about, my lawyer has this all written up and we're good to go. As Sherry said earlier, this is a professional business relationship. You need to have your own representation.
Absolutely. Now, if I did have a practice owner ask his lawyer to recommend another lawyer that they had worked with for someone, and if the person chose to contact them, then that's fine. But the person did not know of an area lawyer, and this was in Pennsylvania just recently. So yes, I'm working with a practice right now. They had worked with a broker, however, they had not gotten an appraisal. And they worked with a broker that is just a general business broker. So they got a value, but they did not get an appraisal. I have found that a lot of banks are going to come in and they want all of the P&Ls, they want the tax returns, and they're gonna tell you how much they'll loan you to a certain extent on a practice. But when is the appropriate time for appraisals? And a lawyer is a must from pretty much the get-go, and an accountant really is as well. I have someone who's looking at buying a practice, and they're getting a letter of intent written up by their lawyer, and they're concurrently working with financial institutions as well. So you really need the lawyer and the accountant from the very beginning. And most coming out of optometry school do not have business backgrounds necessarily and haven't looked at too many P&Ls and tax returns. So.
I'd like to mention something in here, a couple things. One is, if you're looking at buying a practice, it would behoove you to go to a bank and ask them what they might lend you on that face alone. Also, there's 2 appraisals out there. Williamson Group is well known. They're well known in optometry of giving incredible spot on appraisals of a practice. However, Sherry mentioned the banker lender, they're the ones that are really going to determine the value of that practice. Real quick case in point, Williamson Group, and I'm just selecting them. There's other appraisals companies. Let's say they say your practice is worth 250,000. Okay, but the bank looks at it and says, well, it's only worth to us about 225,000. So there's a $25,000 gap, and what happens to the person buying the practice is the bank's going to say, if the owner's asking for 250, you're going to have to come up with another 25,000 just to cover that, because we're not going to give it to you. You know, we're going to give you 225. We're not going to give you 250. So just always keep that in mind on that type of an appraisal, that could happen and does.
Yes.
And
Those
what we
are all
do, by the way, one other thing, brokers, we run into brokers a lot of times that we're handling practices, and practices will call us and say, you know, I haven't been able to sell my practice. Can you help us? And part of the reason is a regular broker out there doesn't have the database of doctors we have, practice owners and candidates like yourself, to approach and say, hey, there's practices for sale. So a lot of times the practice has to get out of that contract with the broker, because if not, we're going to ask for a finder's fee, which is a lot less than a broker's fee. But the owner is going to end up paying two fees. One, the brokerage fee, because the broker doesn't care who sells practice, and then our finder fee. So just an FYI on the future, we can definitely save you money in selling a practice and help you find a buyer for that practice fairly quickly, I believe, compared to usually a regular broker, because they're not set up for it.
No more questions that came into me.
Yeah, none to me directly either. And we appreciate your answers, sharing. Oh,
I say that, and then I got another one.
As if on cue.
Any tips for securing housing when moving to another state? Asking, since this should be done before getting the first paycheck.
Yes, yes. So you can talk with your practice about that. Oftentimes they are willing to help out. Whether it's, I'm guessing they might be referring to needing down payments and such, but I would talk with your practice about that on an individual basis. Not only can they be a good resource for helping you find areas that you might want to live in and affordable areas, if you have a financial need, I would just be upfront and let them know.
Yeah, and generally speaking, people in the practice will know somewhere along the line some good real estate agents that are more than glad to help that candidate, that optometrist. And even I know some may even set up appointments when they get there. They'll pick them up and give them the tour, and not only just show them housing, but also give them a good feel for the area. And sometimes I mention that to the owner. I said, if someone's coming there, it'd be really nice if they could spend maybe 2 or 3 hours or an hour or so with a real estate agent and just have them just give them a quick tour.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially if you're moving out of state to a place that you're unfamiliar. Absolutely use those as a resource. And yeah, and actually, so that reminds me of a question I did hold off on from earlier. It was, I have to scroll up here and find it. Oh, it was about getting your license. So the question specifically was, how long does it take to get your license in Pennsylvania after you graduate? And the short answer to that is, in Pennsylvania, the average turnaround time, at least last year, was about 4 to 6 weeks. So this does go to when you're negotiating contracts, though. In Pennsylvania, if you have somebody that says, I really need a doctor, I want them to start June 1. If you're a new grad, you're not going to have your license on June 1st. If the stars align, you'll have your license by July 1. But most cases, most contracts I see, it's like a July 15 or an August 1 start date. If you are moving out of state and you're completely relocating, you know, you can maybe use that to your advantage too when negotiating. I need this amount of time to get my license. I need this amount of time to find housing. So I can't start on July 1. Can we make my start date in my contract August 1? Give yourself a little bit of breathing room to get situated and relocated to an area, knowing what you have to do and go through the process. Mark would probably know what the turnaround time is for North Carolina and Florida and some of those other states. And there's a document in the resource library at the Bennett Center that says getting your license in all 50 states. It's the checklist of everything you need to have together to apply for your license in all 50 states. They're all different.
Mhm.
Pennsylvania, 4 to 6 week turnaround time.
I
I
would
don't know,
say
Michael, what's it
most
like
of
in some
them.
of the Western territories?
Very similar, actually. Usually about a 4-week to 6-week window on a lot of practices. I don't see them extending it more into 2 or 3 months now. They try
Yeah.
to get it out.
Yeah. And a follow-up question here. Do we negotiate the start date before or after we get the offer?
Yeah, yeah, you need to get that offer first.
Yeah.
That's one time you can't really do an assumptive close. You can't assume and say, when can I start? You
Yeah.
can ask, say, I really hope that I get this position. But yeah, have to wait till they offer it for you. But yes, and almost all practices understand that it's going to take a while to get licensed, and it may take them quite a bit of time to get you credentialed, which is a whole other thing that can delay things. So most of them understand the process and expect it.
Another thing to keep in mind, though, is some practices will not mind hiring you a little bit early before your license to get you in the system, get you acclimated to the computer, the software, the staff, workflow. So they may not pay you an optometrist salary at the time,
Right.
but they're hiring you, and everyone knows in the office you're being there to be an optometrist when it happens. But when you get that license, you are ready to hit the ground running. And so they don't mind just letting you know at times. You don't need to have that license in hand before you can actually start work sometimes.
Yep, I've seen that a lot.
Yeah.
Sherry, you have New Jersey as a territory, right?
I do.
Does New Jersey still have that 6-month kind of, I forget what almost like a probationary period when you're a new doctor in the state? That's Delaware. Okay.
Delaware has that. Yes, where you're basically an intern almost for 6 months. However, most practices understand the process. They know what they need to do. There just needs to be another doctor there with you. And every practice I work with will pay full salary, even during that 6 months. And if you have a Delaware license, that's quite valuable, because it is a difficult license to get. Yeah.
Okay, I think we've hit all the questions. I'm just scrolling through to make sure, but
I love it.
these were great. These are great questions.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks everybody.
Yeah, it keeps us sharp.
We like it. We want you to be engaged, and
things that we don't always think about all the time. So
Right.
it is good to be reminded sometimes.
And when you inevitably think of a great question after tonight, remember our contact information is at the top of the message board, as well as in the emails that Ryan's been sending out. We appreciate everyone carving time out of their day to join ETS Vision tonight. And we hope you all opted in to future contact with ETS. And if not, well, you have our contact information. So we look forward to hearing from you.
That's right.
And if you misplace anything, you can always contact me. I can get you in touch with anybody. I want to thank Mark, Michael, Sherry, and Ben for doing both of these last week and this week's presentation. These were invaluable. This information is so important, and thank you to the students that were able to attend. As I said, if you need access to anything, let me know. I'll be sending out emails with a little follow-up survey, links to the recordings. If you link up with Sherry or Michael or anybody on LinkedIn, I saw that Ben had posted the YouTube video for the recording for last week. with the breakdown of the times. That was really helpful. So if you're looking for a specific subject you wanted to refresh on, follow them on LinkedIn. You'll get all those links and everything for all the video recordings. So on behalf of PCO and Salus, thank you all again. Really appreciate your time.
It was fun.
Yes, it was fun. Thank you. Good night.
All right.
Have a good night,
Thank
y'all.
you. Good night, everybody. We'll talk again soon.
Good night.
All right.